Well, to our returned servicemen and women, we salute you. To our RSA members and our service groups, it's great to see you here today. To our Westland community, as I look around the Regent Theatre, there's not many spare seats. Thank you for attending today. As a show of respect, it means a lot. Unlike last year, when we were in full lockdown, today you have dressed in your finest to join together to remember the sacrifices made to ensure New Zealand would have the freedoms we hold so dearly. And now a message from to the people of Westland from the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand. On Anzac Day, as a nation, we turn our thoughts to all those who have served our country in war, conflict and peacekeeping. At this time last year, New Zealand was in lockdown, yet I was so moved to see the spirit of Anzac Day still shining through, with New Zealanders standing in front of their own homes, listening to the dawn service. It was a testament that Anzac Day is about the best in all of us: unity, endurance and compassion. A very sad consequence of the pandemic was that veterans of the Second World War missed out on their national commemoration on the 15th of August to mark the 75th anniversary of the end of the war in the Pacific. We are privileged to have veterans from that war and subsequent conflicts still amongst us. And these men and women will be honoured at services across Aotearoa today. Also delayed was the dedication of the Pacific Memorial at Pukahoa, the National War Memorial Park. And I was pleased and moved to finally attend the dedication last month in remembrance of the Pacific peoples who have served and sacrificed so much for our country. 2021 marks two special anniversaries. It is 70 years since the Battle of Kaviong and the lead up to Anzac Day 1951. And I take this chance to acknowledge all of the New Zealanders who served in the Korean War. I also want to give special acknowledgement to New Zealanders' role in peacekeeping. In 1951, New Zealand made its first contribution to a multinational peacekeeping operation as part of the United Nations effort to resolve the conflict over Kashmir. In 2021, we mark 70 years of our nation's contribution to peacekeeping efforts around the world. We can all be proud of our service personnel who continue to stand up for international goals of peace and stability, and often at considerable cost. I hope many of us will take a moment to reflect the meaning of Anzac Day and to acknowledge the tragedy of each and every life lost as a result of service overseas. And let us not forget the impact on loved ones, parents, children, siblings, partners and friends, because New Zealand's military history is their story as well. Let us share with all who have served our country and all who continue to serve our recognition and respect as we gather together today to remember on this most special of days. The Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand. In 2021, we remember that when the men and women left to fight in the war, the women were left to not only produce food and munitions, but to keep the families together, to provide love and provide support. Many women served overseas, but today I want to focus on the woman that stayed on, the struggle to carry on, the agony of losing husbands and lovers in battle, of bringing up children on their own, and suffering from the double standards of the time. And then the boys came home, and nothing was the same, as they struggled to pretend that things were now back to normal. Many women married in the early stages of World War II, and then their husbands were gone, often for up to 5 years, and in some cases they never returned. A knock on the door, and the telegram from the Minister of Defence to say they were missing, and everything would go blank for days. In some cases, the telegram said their man was a prisoner of war somewhere, and the weeks turned into months and years. Focusing on the children became a lifesaver, and obtaining part-time work to help the war effort kept you sane. Everything had to be supervised. Vehicles, lighting, food, all ran through the town hall. Local girls in Fox Glacier in World War I wrote to the soldiers serving overseas to keep them up to date on what was happening in the community and to try and stop them from being homesick. Farewells and welcome home functions were held in our Westland halls. Ration books for petrol, sugar, tea, butter, clothing and blackout curtains were the norm. Butter being made in secret to trade for other rations. And yes, it was illegal, and yes, it happened. Each town had a patriotic committee to work out how best the town could support the war effort. Khaki wool was supplied for the women to knit scarves, balaclavas and gloves for the boys overseas. Aunt Daisy encouraged women around New Zealand to cook their way through the war with limited provisions. Women became herd testers, ran farms, kept the community going. Others joined the WAAC and the Army Nursing Services or Red Cross. If you were married with children, you were exempt from manpower, and that covered a big majority of women in our Western community. After the initial shock of their men leaving, life would start to return to some sort of normal, and a social life became possible. Sometimes a special person would come along and become a friend in need, and sometimes this developed into an affair to fill the void of love and companionship. Then, often after 5 years, imagine the call came out of the blue. It's me, I'm coming home. The person that had filled the emotional gap gets cast to one side, and how awkward it must have been to share the bed again with someone who was by now a complete stranger. A stranger to his children, some of whom he had never met as his wife was pregnant when they left to go overseas. A stranger who would never discuss what had occurred overseas. His eyes full of pain, times when the subject was broached of an old mate who was killed in action. A stranger in his hometown where he'd been away up to 5 years. A stranger that had to find employment to regain his role as the head of the family. His insistence when a fellow serviceman arrived to head to the pub, often for days, and hangovers and the arguments that followed. His intolerance of the children, where a black and white military response was standard. And the love and closeness needed by the children often never came back. The days which marked an event, often unknown to the woman, that would trigger those black days of moods, anger and depression. And yet, things did get better. Relationships were rebuilt and families were restored. The men found jobs and become part of the local community again. In the 40s, a woman's place was in the home, and it was many years before the amazing role they played in keeping home raising the children, working for the war effort, and then the way they brought back into their lives and communities our men, many of whom were damaged both physically and mentally. And it was years before this contribution was finally recognised. To the woman who went overseas and to those who stayed, we salute you. You helped maintain the war effort, and you rebuilt New Zealand after the wars had finished. Most of all, you raised our children, who then become, like it is today, our future. Thank you.